All right, Brandis, thanks very much. And Illinois is on the verge of eliminating the state's last restriction on abortions. That's among the action in Springfield, where the legislature is in the midst of its last scheduled session of the year. Amanda Vinicky joins us now with the latest. Amanda, what is the latest?
Well, so Paris, Illinois has had a law on the books since 2019, so fairly recently actually, that protects access to an abortion as a fundamental right. But critics say that there's another older law, this one that's been in place since the mid-90s, that infringes on that right. And this requires that parents receive at least 48 hours notice before their minor child can have an abortion. And critics are working to repeal that Parental Notification Act. Taylor Lane is a student at University of Illinois Chicago, and she says that it is impossible to legislate healthy child-parent conversations and relationships.
By forcing conversations with certain designated family members, this law serves to only potentially put young people in danger. We know our lives and our situations. Our work shows us that young people who are forced to notify their parents of this procedure face consequences such as homelessness, abuse, and loss of financial and emotional support.
Now, the existing law does offer a workaround to parental notification by allowing teens who are in potentially abusive relationships to instead have a confidential hearing with a judge. And State Representative Avery Bourne, a Republican from Central Illinois, says that outside of those particular circumstances, parents should very much be made aware if their child is going to have a procedure that has very grave, she says, emotional, psychological, and potential health consequences.
There is no requirement, if this were to pass, that any parent would ever know that their 13-year-old got an abortion because their 20-year-old boyfriend took them. There is no requirement that they would know.
Now, the Senate last night voted to repeal that Parental Notification Act, but the House beginning to gather, got a full night still yet ahead. There is still a lot of hesitancy in this chamber, so we'll be watching to see whether, in fact, they send that measure to Governor J.B. Pritzker, who supports repeal. It is, however, full steam ahead for other issues, including some changes to that relatively new law that gives Chicago an elected school board. Among those changes, putting an immediate moratorium on closure of any CPS schools. Also, a provision that forbids members of this to be elected board from getting paid for that. That's something that has State Representative Curtis Tarver concerned. He says that to do that board job effectively, you have to put in at least 25, maybe 30 hours a week. And he's concerned that only wealthy individuals will run to be on the elected school board if they aren't going to get paid for that work.
I know there's a lot of talk about no other school board, in Illinois that's elected gets paid, and none of them have 400,000 students either. None of them have the gun violence that we have. None of them have, the students with PTSD and things like that we have in Chicago. And so I just feel personally, and I want to say this more from my district, who will come after me about this, that I think we do need to pay people who are on that board. We pay people on the police board and they do nothing.
Now, another measure that is poised to soon be likely heading to Pritzker's desk guarantees that teachers, custodians, food service workers, bus drivers will be paid even if classes are canceled or they have to go remote. State Senator Christopher Belt says that teachers, they're very important. He says that he recently watched the new movie Halloween Kills, and the thought struck him that COVID has done more to wreak havoc and deaths in these past 2 years than that fictional villain Michael Myers has in 40 years.
And yet we require our teachers and support staff to go in person, to go back in person, to teach, to do their jobs, and encounter their students, and quite possibly encounter COVID.
Now, some teachers, as well as nurses and other workers, have been using Illinois' Healthcare Right of Conscience Act to skirt COVID testing, masking, vaccinations, and mandates. Now, that law was put in place in Illinois to prevent doctors and other healthcare workers with religious or moral objections from having to perform procedures like abortions. Governor J.B. Pritzker says it was never intended to allow anti-maskers and anti-vaxxers from avoiding the rules during a deadly pandemic.
That's very different than someone refusing to get tested when they're walking into a school. That's not a healthcare provider. That's just an individual just yelling out conscience and saying, I don't want to do it, isn't good enough. We have to keep people healthy and safe. That's the whole purpose of the mitigations that we've put in place.
But the Pritzker administration is struggling to win legislative approval for modifying the Healthcare Right of Conscience Act to clarify that protections do not cover these COVID protections and mitigations. Now, at an unrelated event this morning, Pritzker was asked whether the struggle to get his way on both this and the parental notification repeal, what that says about his political influence and relationship with legislators or lack thereof. Now, he brushed off that question, instead shifting the blame and saying that those are not actually his key initiatives. Pritzker says that his priority is winning tax credits and other incentives for electric vehicle manufacturers, and there are negotiations ongoing with that, but so far, that too appears to be stalled. There's a rift with unions. Now, Pritzker today announced that next month he's going to be traveling overseas, going to London and Glasgow to try and talk about Illinois' major energy package and also to talk about Illinois as a destination for clean energy businesses, hinging on that incentive package eventually getting passed. He really wants Illinois to play ball in that sector. And, speaking of playing ball, another proposal that we're getting attention here in the Capitol would allow betting on Illinois college sports events. Right now, you cannot place a bet if there is any sort of game or match with an Illinois university or college playing. But it seems as if there is some, well, if I was going to place my bets, I guess, if you will, that is another measure that will be going to the governor's desk to allow it. With that, back to you.
A lot of activity down there right now, Amanda, including, as you mentioned at the beginning, the parental notification law, which we will talk about more in Spotlight.